Bonsai. I'm the Cobra Kai Kid. Today I'm joined by Phil McGowan, who is nominated twice this year for the Emmy Awards. He is the music mixer, the sound mixer for Cobra Kai Seasons 1 through 4. How are you doing today, Phil?
Good.
Awesome. That's great. So, congratulations, by the way, on the Emmy nominations. So, Cobra Kai was nominated for Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Comedy or Drama Series. So, what's that like being nominated for the Emmys?
I got my first nomination last year for Ozark, and that was my very first ever, which was really exciting. But then, yeah, this year it upped the ante with having 2 nominations in 1 year. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
That was a fun morning.
Oh yeah, how did you find out?
I was just on the page, just refreshing it at 8:30 whenever the nominations were announced, and then just scrolling down to obviously all the sound categories are way at the bottom. So I had to find the page. I was like, oh, Cobra Kai, cool. And I looked and I was like, oh, Tina too. That's awesome. Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah. What was what was your reaction? Were you surprised, excited? Did you kind of know it was going to happen?
A little both. I figured I had a decent chance of one of them getting nominated, and I was like, they won't both get, because those are the 2 shows. I knew I was included on the ballot for those, or on the submission. And I was like, they both have a decent chance, probably one. Then I was like, oh my God, it was both of them. It was super cool. Then my wife was on a work call and she was telling all her friends, because I was I was freaking out.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations again. And when are the Emmys? September
11th and 12th. So September 11th is the Cobra Kai night, and then the 12th is the Tina one.
Okay.
There's 3 ceremonies the weekend before the quote unquote real Emmys on the 19th, where they do the Creative Arts Emmys.
And do you join a Zoom call? Do you know how that works yet?
They're in person this year.
Okay.
They had limited the tickets a lot, so I'm not unfortunately able to go to the Cobra Kai one on Saturday night, but I'm going to Sunday afternoon for Tina, so that'll be fun.
Oh, okay, cool. Now, so you're the score mixer for Cobra Kai, and a lot of people might not know exactly what that is. Do you want to explain what your role is on the show and what you do for Cobra Kai? Am I breaking up, by the way? Am I cutting
You look
out?
you look a little blocky on my end.
All right, wait. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna refresh my page 1 second. If you don't mind.
Yeah, good.
Just so
All good.
hopefully it. Okay.
That looks better.
All right. Sometimes it goes in and out, so I'm hoping that doesn't do it. I don't know why, but
Connections are weird. Yeah.
it's very weird. And I'm plugged into the internet, which is I don't know. But yeah, do you want to explain what your role is on the show?
Yeah, so I'm a mixing and recording engineer. So typically people would see me as the guy behind that big giant console and recording studios on the other side of the glass when there's musicians in there. So that's my general audio engineer is technically my profession, but I do it specifically for scores for film, television, and video games. So that's kind of what I specialize in, is mixing and recording music that's going to be used as the underscore. Scary music, action music, horror music, whatever is needed in the project. So I'm basically taking all the elements, sometimes stuff that I've recorded, if it's live orchestra or drums or guitars or whatever, and I'm basically bringing them all together in one Pro Tools session for a piece of music, and then doing EQ and compression and levels and panning and just making everything sound as good as it can, in an appropriate fashion. And then I'm splitting everything out into a bunch of different elements that are sort of, they're all mixed. They all sound good on their own, but I'll give another team of mixers, the strings, the brass, the percussion, the drums, the guitar, so on and so forth. So I have to organize all that, and then I deliver all of those music stems that have been mixed by me to another team of mixers who do the final mix with the dialogue, sound effects, and then my music mixes.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a very tough, long process, so many different elements to it.
Yeah, it's a fun combination because I get to be creative too. Zach and Leo have certain styles they want to do and certain things that they want to do with the music, and Cobra Kai is a mishmash of every imaginable style. There's electronic music, there's 80s glam metal, then there's John Williams style big orchestral cues. It's all over the map, which is really fun. and I've been working with those guys for a few years now, so we have a good rapport. And have a lot of fun on it, using a lot of plugins and a lot of like effects and things that I probably wouldn't use on other things, because Cobra Kai, we're trying to sometimes give it a little bit of that 80s, 90s kind of sound. So yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah. What I love about the music is like exactly like what you described, like how it's like so diverse. Like there's just like all these different kinds of music, and it's like required for the show because you have like the Miyagi side, the Cobra Kai side, then like the synthesizers, the fights, the John Williams themes, like, and then like there's like I feel like each season, like, you know, like a new instrument will be introduced, a new like sound, and it's like these like if you like listen to it like on its own, it's like weird sounds that like you wouldn't really picture being in music, but then it just works, you know?
Yeah, Zach and Leo do a phenomenal job writing the music for the show, and lots of really cool stuff coming up for season 4.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Hayden tweeted out the Cobra Kai tournament music with like a fire emoji, and that was like, come on, so exciting.
Yeah, they can say more than I can, so it's
It's
cool.
cool. Okay.
Yeah, Zach and Leo seem to up the ante every single year. See, I mean, season 1 and 2 were fantastic, but then season 3 was like, oh my god! Especially the last episode they were nominated for. It felt like I was working on a movie, not on a TV show, with some of the music that's in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that. Like, I feel like season 1 and even 2 were kind of like the groundworks of the music, like introducing the themes, and then season 3 just went full out. Especially like with Duel of the Snakes, I think like that was probably like out of like all the themes, that was just, I don't know, absolutely nuts.
Yeah, well, they tie in themes from all the different characters, and sometimes it's really subtle because they'll play it really slow, or they'll play a big theme that's just on low instruments like cellos and basses or something like that. Or sometimes it's really soft in the background on like a little pad or a synth or something like that. But there's themes all over the music for Cobra Kai. They do a great job of that.
Yeah. Did like, are you like a Star Wars fan? Did that Duel of the Snakes kind of give you like the Duel of the Fates vibes in a way?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I have to be careful with some of my clients. I mean, because composers are all my clients. They're who hires me. I have to be careful sometimes when I make comparisons, because I'm like, ooh, is this someone they like? But I was pretty sure when I told them, I was like, yeah, this reminds me of like episode 2 or 3, or because the prequels, say what you will about them, the music is phenomenal. Like John Williams wrote his butt off for those for the prequels, and yeah, it definitely was reminding me of some of the music from the prequels,
Yeah, definitely.
and they liked that comparison.
Yeah, a lot of like Star Wars vibes. Well, the story is similar in a way, you know,
Yeah.
like Johnny, I am your father. The Kreese is like the emperor. So,
Yep.
so I love that whole like with the music and then with the story, like the similarities. So
Johnny Skywalker.
Johnny Skywalker, and now you have Terry Silver, who's like now the new emperor. Like you thought Kreese was bad, but it's only gonna get worse now.
Yep. You'll all see at Christmas.
have you seen this season?
Bits of it. The music isn't everywhere, and we bounce around all the time, because typically when I mix an episode of TV show or anything, really, I start with the biggest, loudest, craziest, thickest piece of music and then kind of work down from there. So I mix all out of sequence. So sometimes I'll sit back and I'll like watch down the whole thing once I'm done with it. But for Cobra Kai, I think I'm just gonna wait to watch it like all in order once it comes out.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
once they finish too, I don't have like the final sound effects and all the ADR lines and all that, any color correction or visual effects. A lot of that's always still happening at the same time we're working on the music.
Yeah, but you do see the footage if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so you if you start with the loudest themes, does that mean like you're starting with the finale? Like you're seeing like first thing you click on is All Valley Tournament or something?
Well, when I started those episodes, yeah, the music I was starting with were the big moments. But usually we did, we went in order as far as episode wise. So I didn't work on the last 2 episodes until later on.
Got it.
Yeah. So I know generally what's going on, but I haven't watched them down like in sequence. I'll wait till it's fully finished to get that experience.
Yeah. Are you a fan of the show? Like, do you like the story and all that?
Oh, totally. And I finally got my wife into it. She's like obsessed with the show now as well. She's can't wait to see season 4 and what happens. I sadly though, I still need to. I have some time now. My schedule's kind of chilling out. I haven't seen Karate Kid 2 and 3. I've seen the first one ages ago, so I need to have like a little mini marathon to catch up on the movies before season 4 comes out. So I guess we have a little bit of time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely check those out. And then there's like a lot of like, even with the music, there's a lot of like, because they like get callbacks from Karate Kid 2 and 3.
Yep.
So
When I'm a
definitely.
huge fan of 80s culture in general, like 80s music, 80s movies. So it's kind of a good fit for me because, you know, a lot of the cues, like I said, cues meaning like the pieces of music that are in the episode. Some of them are just kind of traditional, like big orchestra score stuff that I do all the time. But then sometimes I'm just mixing straight up like 80s rock. And fortunately, I'm a fan of all that kind of music. So getting gated reverbs on the drums and stuff like that, and kind of the whole style, and you know, big metal, like glam metal guitars and stuff like that. Um, it's good to kind of have something to call back to being a fan of that period of music.
Yeah. What kind of like music and movies specifically inspired you?
I mean, a lot of well, for 80s stuff, I'm a huge 80s pop fan, like Peter Gabriel or Tears for Fears or ABC. Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Let's see who else. Um, I mean, pretty much any 80s pop song, which for me started when I first played Grand Theft Auto Vice City in what was that 2003 when that came out, and I was like in middle school or high school when that game came out, and that was all 80s, and that's what got me. I was like, oh, what is this music? This is really cool. And then I was like trying to look up. I mean, we had no Spotify back then, but trying to find all the all the songs from that. That's kind of what started my 80s pop fandom. And then movies wise, you know, obviously like Indiana Jones and the last 2 Star Wars came out in the 80s. Love Back to the Future. Huge Blade Runner fan. They're I feel like some of the stuff, the Vietnam callback stuff in season 3 kind of had some Blade Runner vibes. Zach and Leo busted out like an old like Prophet synthesizer, and that was definitely used on Blade Runner. Just big verby, you know, bendy synths and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think I always said like as soon as I heard it, the fight between Daniel and Chosen that they rescored from Karate Kid Part 2, like that how Zach and Leo added their own score, that
Yeah,
was like total Indiana Jones vibes for me.
yeah.
Right?
When we researched too, I got all of the scores, the Bill Conti scores from the original movies, and listened to all of those. And I allude to that in my breakdown video a bit, that I was trying to use a convolution reverb that actually was based on the same scoring stage they recorded the original films here in LA. That room no longer exists, unfortunately, but we have an impulse response that basically, yeah, I can put the orchestra inside sort of what that room sounds like. And then trying to, you know, for we moved away from that a little bit in season 3. It became a little bit more of a modern big like score production. But I think for the middle of season 3 and then season 2, we were trying to kind of do some throwback stuff, make it like a little bit tapier, a little mid-rangier, not quite as pristine sounding, because stuff from the 80s wasn't quite as cleaned up sounding as things are from like the 90s and now, as far as how the orchestra sounds. So yeah, we did some research, and then Zach and Leo definitely were studying a lot of the Bill Conti scores and kind of using little throwbacks to things that he did in the movies.
Yeah. I definitely noticed like when the themes from Bill Conti were taken, it was like it had that like older sound to it. It wasn't like touched up really, but it gave it that like old nostalgic feeling, you know?
Yeah. And that was a fun challenge, you know, trying to like hold back, not making it sound too good.
Yeah, yeah. So, how did you first get into score mixing, and like what made you want to do it as a career?
I mean, I've been playing music since I was in second grade. When I first started taking piano lessons. Both my parents weren't professionals, but they were both musicians. They both played keyboards. It's actually a fun fact. I grew up playing around with a keyboard called a Korg M1 that my dad had. And Zach now has a Korg M1 that he's been using all over the Cobra Kai score. So I'm like recognizing sounds and little patches and stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that playing with my dad's keyboard. So I was always like playing around with keyboards, and my dad had this little Mackie mixer that all his keyboards went into. I remember reading the manual for that thing backwards and forwards, learning signal flow, learning how that works. It's just a tiny little like 10 channel mixer for his keyboards, but that was the first like mixer that I learned. And then around that same time, I was like starting to do some live sound stuff. There's a guy in my hometown who did small concerts and things like that, and I would help him out doing just live sound basically. So just setting up microphones and like speakers on sticks, really basic, like small stuff, all with like old gear and stuff that was like half working. So I had to find workarounds and stuff like that because I grew up in Central Maine. So there wasn't like a lot of entertainment per se, like a big entertainment industry there. And then I think it was sophomore year of high school is when I first got Pro Tools. My band director actually had a friend who somehow, I think it was probably the only Pro Tools studio in Central Maine at the time. He upgraded to a Pro Tools HD system, which is like the professional level system. And he gifted me his little PCI card for my computer to use Pro Tools LE in 2004, I think it was. So I started with Pro Tools 5 in 2004 when I was in high school. And was also kind of getting into composition. I wanted to be a composer for a while. I still dabble like writing music here and there, but just for fun. And then, around that same time, I decided I wanted to do it professionally or at least study it. So that's how I found Berklee College of Music, which is where I went from 2006 to 2009. Originally, I was going to do a dual major with film scoring and music production. But then one of the fun things about a school like Berklee or any other like really good art school is you're surrounded by so much talent. So I kind of realized saxophone, like I was a good saxophone player in Central Maine, but like I was sitting next to like the next Michael Brecker and the next David Sambor and the next Coltrane, whatever. I was like, okay, like I'm okay, but these guys are like, they're really going to be great. So I didn't really like pursue that as much. And then same thing with writing. There were friends I had in the film scoring department that just kind of had it, they had a knack just for quickly writing music for, in that style. I mean, that's a broad statement because film music style can mean these days pretty much anything. But as far as just the whole process, I just kind of realized that I was best at mixing and recording and sort of music production. So I just ended up doing one major. I also didn't want to be in school for 5 years. So I just dropped the film scoring major and just did music production engineering. And at that time I was touring with a band from Maine as their engineer on the weekends during college. I was on the road with them, kind of just driving all around in a van. I was kind of hoping they were going to like explode and go on like a big tour with them, but that didn't end up panning out just after college. So I finally decided to move to LA in March of 2010. And I was like, well, I love film music. I like have an interest in maybe being a composer, but probably not, probably more going to be an engineer. And I was like, oh, score mixing sounds perfect because it's recording and mixing, but specifically for film scores. That sounds like a really good combination of all my interests. So I tried to email like whatever scoring mixers I could find contact info for, which in 2010 was hard. They weren't on like Facebook and stuff like that back then. It was kind of harder to get a hold of them. A couple people got back to me, but then this one guy, Greg Townley, got back to me. Kind of gave me the rundown when I was still in Boston. Like, oh, like LA is the mecca of audio engineering. Like everyone comes here. It's really hard, yada, yada, trying to like kind of prepare me for what LA is like when you move here trying to be an engineer. And so I took a bunch of notes and I was like, okay, I'll let you know when I'm coming out. And then March 2010, I finally drove out here and I lucked out that just he happened to need an assistant at the time. So he sat me in front of like one of his big giant Pro Tools sessions and had me tell him what was going on and like, kind of go over the signal flow and stuff. He's like, all right, well, Pro Tools enough. Like, yeah, you want a gig? And then I was like, sure. So then I got lucky. I was his assistant for like 2 or 3 months. And he mostly works with a composer named Rolf Kent, who at that time was probably best known for like Sideways and Wedding Crashers. But when I was there, I worked on the first movie I ever worked on was Killers with Ashton Kutcher. And that was a Rolf Kent score that Greg mixed and I assisted to mix. And then we also did Charlie St. Cloud around that time. But then work ran out with him. So I was kind of like freelance assisting in LA, which is really tough, especially it's even harder now, but cost of living even 2010 here was really expensive. But I got fortunate that a few months later, I got double recommended by Greg and another engineer that I was working with to work with Trevor Morris, who's a composer that I was on staff with for about 4.5 years. So I started out as his composer's assistant. So I was dealing with his like software synths and instruments and like fixing his Logic template. I mean, he later moved to Cubase, but when I first started with him using Logic, which are composing sequencer softwares that he uses. But he knew I wanted to be a mixer. So eventually I started sliding over into doing more mixing and editing and sort of music production for him. And then in 2015, April 2015, I went freelance. And that's where I've been ever since. That's kind of the goal for most people in this industry. Eventually everyone goes freelance. There's not a lot of like staff jobs per se for composers or engineers or orchestrators or people like that.
Wow. Okay. So what was the name of the mixer who you emailed and who you were the assistant of?
Greg Townley.
Greg Townley.
He also does a lot of stuff for Audio Machine, which is like a music library. lots of like production stuff too. He doesn't just mix; he does like producing and things like that for now. But he was my first connection, like my first real connection in the film scoring world, like my foot in the door. And basically, I could trace back every connection eventually to starting with him and then meeting people through him. So that's kind of like a good way to start out here, is getting your foot in the door somewhere and getting a few connections and then just meeting as many people as possible. And then the job with Trevor is actually how I met Zach and Leo. So at the time when I was still working at that studio, Trevor had a mix room, a mixing studio that was tailor-made for mixing scores. And Chris Beck and his mixer, Casey Stone, would rent Trevor's studio to mix scores for their movies. So I got to assist Casey, and then Chris would come by and stuff like that. So they mixed R.I.P.D. and Ant-Man, I think, are the main two films that they mixed at Trevor's studio, and I was assisting on. That's when I met Zach and Leo, because at the time they were both working with Chris Beck. And then I went freelance, or I think around the same time that they moved on to doing their own thing. And then we first worked together on a YouTube show called Sing It, which was like I don't know if anybody remembers that show. It was like an early YouTube Red, or is that what it's called back then? YouTube changed their studio a bunch.
Yeah.
Their name. I think it was YouTube Red originally.
YouTube Red, yeah.
Yeah, but it was like a mock, like behind the scenes of like a talent show. So I got to record and mix a bunch of like live performances of all these hit songs that the characters were doing on scene, and that was Zach and Leo did all that stuff. And then I've worked with both of them individually, and then on some stuff that they've done together. And then Cobra Kai came like 4 years ago. I'm trying to remember. I was looking through my old like archive files. I think it was 2017 when I first started in season 1.
2018.
Yeah. I think
you started.
I might have started in 17. Yeah.
Yes,
17,
yeah.
18. Yeah.
Yeah. It came out in 18.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But that's how a lot of things work out, in the entertainment industry. It's like, you meet somebody randomly either this way, or you're assisting, or they're assisting, and, you never know who you're going to run across and where it's going to lead.
Yeah. So how did the Cobra Kai, because you had the relationship with Zach and Leo, did they get hired and then like ask you to join?
Yeah. So all my clients, like I said, are composers. So anybody who I work with, generally, they get hired on something and then they'll hire me. And certain people, like the guy Danny and Saunders, who do Ozark, Zach and Leo have been hiring me for a lot of stuff. A lot of times they'll have me on stuff that they work on. So I don't typically ever choose what I work on. It's usually one of my clients gets a project. They're like, "Hey, you free to do this movie or TV show?" And if I'm available, I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And it is what it is, whatever the project is. So yeah, I don't go out like seeking projects that I'd like to work on, which isn't really. I mean, it works for above the line people like cinematographers or composers. Once they get to a certain level, they can be a little bit more choosy with their projects. But below the line people like myself, we just kind of work on whatever we can.
Yeah. And how has COVID like affected like your process, like pre-COVID, COVID, like did things stop for you for a while, or?
It slowed down for a bit. Last year, I only worked like one day in August, but then it picked up and it sort of balanced out in the end. Now, as I was expecting, that things are, at least they've started filming projects again, and Hollywood's kind of picked up again. So now I'm like insanely busy for pretty much the rest of the year, which is great. But as far as my process, I mean, I'm at my home studio right now. I have a studio behind my house in LA, where I do all my mixing work, which these days, COVID mostly just stopped I only did one like recording session during COVID. Pretty much everything was just mixing here. So I was already set up to work from home. I'd already been working here a lot. Cobra Kai, I don't think I've ever recorded anything for Cobra Kai because the drummer and the guitarist that we work here, they're good at recording themselves. And then we've always done orchestra in Eastern Europe. So they were already, just sending me files to mix. So as far as Cobra Kai goes and a lot of my other projects, nothing really changed. I just, wasn't going out on the weekends.
Oh, okay. So they you haven't recorded any music for Cobra Kai. You receive all the files. Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, every time I start a Cobra Kai day, it's like usually collating tons of. So I'm getting downloads from Eastern Europe with the orchestra files. Zach and Leo are sending me stuff from their sequencers, from their computers with all of their splits, all the synths, all the sampled percussion, and all that kind of stuff. And then the guitarist and the drummer that we use, they're sending me files and Pro Tools sessions, and then I have to kind of organize it all and combine it together and get everything into one Pro Tools session per piece of music. For me to mix. So and sometimes I start the night before, because if I know it's going to be a big episode, I'm like, all right, let me at least wrangle all the assets before I actually start mixing. but it's a lot of organization. Though I like that. That's one of the things I like about score mixing versus mixing for albums or records is in general, it just requires a lot more organization because there's so many different things that have to be done in a certain way, that be labeled a certain way. Everything has to be routed a certain way and kind of organized, and we have to make sure it's in sync and at the right frame rate. And there's all these kind of technical requirements just to get it delivered correctly. But I kind of love that aspect of it because I like things kind of really neat and tidy and organized. So sometimes part of my job, apart from creatively just making everything sound good, is also just, making sure everything's there, everything's in the right place, everything's kind of organized and put together and kind of, in a good place, so that when I pass on the music to the dub, where they're going to mix it with the dialogue and sound effects, it's all organized and clean and as, easy for them to use as possible.
Yeah. When I was watching the Duel of the Snakes video, the breakdown that you did, which if you guys haven't seen it, you should check it out. Do you know like what's the title of it again exactly?
I think it's just called Mixing Duel of the Snakes from Cobra Kai. But my channel is, if you just search McGowan Soundworks, that's my YouTube channel, and the couple of videos I have up are on that channel.
Okay, wait, did I put it in the description? No, I didn't put it in the description, but I'll do that after. So, yeah, when I was watching that, there's like 30 different instruments, like all these files, and I'm like I've done editing and music editing, and I'm like, oh, like how do you keep track of like what's what, and also like the volume, like how do you like balance everything, like one thing not too loud than this, like how do you keep track of all that?
I mean, it's just kind of the way that I show that video is almost kind of my process, especially if it's a cue that's going to have orchestra featured. Everything, I'll get it all organized and get everything in the right place, and I'll organize my Pro Tools session in the way that you see in that video, dragging tracks so they're in the right place, depending on what stem they're going to be on. And a stem is basically like sum down, like all the drum microphones will mix down to a stem called drums that I'll send to the dub. But yeah, I get it all organized so that I know what's there, know what's going on. And then usually I'll mute everything except for one element. So usually I'll just start with just the orchestra, kind of get that sounding good, get it tidied up, kind of do automation or like some EQ or something. I'm like, okay, orchestra, there's one element. So it's basically dumbing down things. So I have like, 40 mics that are the orchestra. Well, okay, that's all now mixed and sounds like one element that is the orchestra. Okay, let's unmute the drums. Okay, get those sounding good. That's an element. Unmute the drum set, because we have like separate percussion that's taikos and surdos and sort of big orchestral percussion. Then we have a drum kit usually too, with Sam, who's our great drummer on the show. And then that sounds good. And then basically like kind of one by one, just stacking elements and kind of adjusting things as I go. I'm like, okay, well, the guitars are in there. Well, the orchestra's a little too loud. I mean, just turn that down a little bit and kind of just kind of massaging everything as I build all the elements in. And then once I have everything on, then it's kind of just going over the piece of music over and over again, just making small adjustments as I hear things. But I think having a process and organization, that's how I can get through, a lot of music quickly, because typically I only have one day to mix all the music for an episode. Like 310, the one that's nominated, we had 2 days because we just knew ahead of time there's going to be a ton of music and a ton of thick music. So tall music, as you see in that, lots of elements. And that takes a little bit longer just because there's so much stuff going on. But then there's easier cues too. Like some of the cues in Cobra Kai, it's just one recording of orchestra and like a synth pad that mixes really quickly because I reuse all of the settings, all the EQs and the levels and stuff like that of the microphones. I import all that so that when I open a new cue I've never heard before, at least those settings are there, and then I just kind of need to massage a few things and then move on.
Yeah. Someone in the chat asked, how would you rate yourself as a fighter? Could you last one round with Hawk? And then Zach responded and said Phil could beat Hawk. Is that true? Is that true?
If I could get him underneath me and I could just sit on him, because I'm probably a lot bigger than him, but I know I'm not much of, I've never been in a fight. I feel like I should take like boxing lessons or something, because I'm a big guy, but I've never thrown a punch or anything. I never got into fights like in high school. So ultimately that'd probably be pretty bad. I took karate for like a few weeks as a kid and didn't make it very far.
I like how Zach's in the chat and like that's like the question he responds to, but hey, he has confidence in you, so
absolutely.
Thanks for popping in, Zach. So I mean, speaking of Zach and Leo, what's it like collaborating with them? and now you're probably gonna have to like kiss up to them because like Zach's in the chat. Not
No,
kidding.
I knew Zach. Zach's always watching me. You know, no, I'm kidding. Um, no, I mean we're all like around the same age, and we grew up with similar influences. And like I said, we all love 80s pop and like 80s glam metal and old film scores and things like that. So I think we generally have similar sensibilities. So it's, and especially now that we're in season 3, season 4, the show's kind of has a sound, and a lot of the different themes and things like that already kind of have a general direction that we know is heading in. So some of the episodes, if they're small and there's not a lot, it's a lot of organization. But once I get everything kind of put in place, it's not super hard. Once we get to the later episodes every season, then it gets more work, just kind of getting those big giant thick cues to sound good and for everything to translate. That's really the biggest challenge of those. It's when you have just tons of elements trying to figure out what element's going to be featured at what time. Like, oh, the guitars are leading here, now the orchestra's leading, now the drums are leading, now the synth is leading, and kind of moving the chess pieces around as we get through things. But we get along really well.
Yeah. Do they ever like send you it because like you work separately, right? Like they send you in and then you do the whole thing by yourself. You don't really collaborate in person?
No, I mean, usually by the time I'm mixing, they're writing and preparing for the next episode or the next batch of episodes. So most of the time I'm just here by myself, and I get everything on the internet on Dropbox, and then I upload mixes of things to Dropbox. Then they review everything. They write me this giant email with all the notes. I do the notes, send up another, whatever cues had notes on them, and then we kind of go back and forth until we're done. Um, the last we did for the end of season 4, and then I can't remember for season 3. They did come by for like the really big episodes, because it's just easier if we're going to go in and like bar by bar or piece by piece kind of be changing things and adjusting things. Way easier just to do it in person instead of me making a few adjustments, export a mix, upload it, wait for notes, go back and forth. That would take so long with the level of detail they want on some of the bigger pieces of music. But that was fun, because I mean, honestly, even before COVID, 95% of the time I'm just in here by myself, just mixing and just uploading stuff for people to review, for my clients to review. So it's always fun when people actually come by.
Yeah. So like if you're mixing a track and say like you're mixing it and then you kind of like notice something, like maybe like this can be re-recorded or maybe this can be added, is there kind of like do you like reach back out to Zach and Leo for them to do like additional stuff, or is it pretty much like the first take, you take whatever they give you and you work with?
Usually I have everything, and usually everything's kind of ready and they've already thought about that ahead of time. Though sometimes between the two of us, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's them, will be like, oh, or like sometimes we'll record the guitars from the show, and sometimes Zach will be like, oh, well, can we like blend my guitars from, because usually I'll mute other stuff and then add the new, or like orchestra, we'll mute all of the quote unquote fake orchestra and then add the real one. Sometimes we're like, oh, well, let's bring back the sampled horns or the sampled whatever for here or there. Usually everything's pretty good though. On the big episodes, more times than not, it's me being like, oh, I think I'm missing something from this cue, because there were so many things to get to me. They're like, oh yeah, let me export that and upload it real quick. I might be missing like a synth pad or something like that from a cue. But no, generally everything's usually pretty organized by the time it comes to me, and I have everything, and I'm just sort of sorting through it all.
Yeah. When in the Duel of the Snakes video, like when you like were playing each sound individually, it was like I found that like really cool. Like just like I could like imagine just like a full track with like the horns or something. So like I'm curious like what like instruments or sounds from Cobra Kai like are your particular favorites, like you like to mix or like just have like a nice sound to you?
I mean, like I mentioned before, anything labeled M1 from the Korg M1 just is super nostalgic for me, because I probably played with all those patches on my dad's Korg M1 as a kid, just playing around with his keyboard. So those are always fun. I loved all the Prophet stuff. They used an actual Prophet, which is an old synthesizer, for all the Vietnam flashback stuff. There's all these like kind of bendy, wacky, ethereal kind of tension pads. That was a really cool element, and that's all over the Duel of the Snakes feature. Like whenever they're flashing back to Vietnam, that's kind of a theme there. And then Leo always has amazing Iwi stuff that he plays. Whenever he pulls out like the Shagahachi patches and things like that on Iwi, that's always super fun. And I mean, I can every time I hear it, I can see him playing it, because if you guys, I don't know if there's videos up of the concert that they did a few years ago for season 3. Well, I think that was 3, right? Not 2. Time is a blur now.
I think the
I
concert was
can.
for season 2, actually.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, those are some of my favorite sounds. And then they're always writing really cool stuff for orchestra. So the orchestra, and especially some of the upcoming stuff, we have some really amazing orchestra stuff coming, which is always a joy to mix.
Yeah. Speaking of upcoming stuff, like you gotta the fans gotta know something. So I'll ask you without trying to ask too much. Do you think, like, how would you compare like season 4's score to what we've heard in season 1 through 3?
It somehow manages to take season 3 to 11. Like it's another amplification. I feel like every season just gets like more epic, more epic, more epic, more epic, and yeah, season 4 brings a whole new level. Really
Yeah,
excited for everyone to hear that, and for the soundtrack album to come out whenever that's going to come. Probably around Christmas when the show comes out. So it's going to be fun. We're all excited about it.
yeah. And without like giving anything away, like, is there like maybe like anything off the top of your head, like in season 4, that kind of like breaks the bounds, like not just like more epic, but like things that maybe like new instruments or new new techniques that you use in season 4 that kind of made like the score better?
Yeah, I mean, there's one sequence that's like I think it's like a 4-minute cue at the beginning of one of the episodes, that basically features almost every theme from all seasons, almost every instrument. Like that one took us the longest out of
Oh
season
my
4 to
god.
work on, and so yeah, you'll probably know when it happens, what piece of music it is. But that was really fun. That was like the last thing we did because there was so much going on in there. But it's almost like a sequence of themes of everything from Cobra Kai.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
So that'll be cool.
That it's kind of like reminding me of The Good, the Bad, and the Badass, the one from season 3 where it had uh Miyagi-Do theme, KREESE's theme, and the Eagle Fang theme like all combined.
Yeah,
That's what you're kind of like.
something like that. Yeah, you'll see.
Yeah. I love when like it's like they like interweave like the themes, like making it like you wouldn't like expect it to come in, but then it like comes in and it just all ties in like through like the different notes. It's pretty cool stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, Zach and Leo are great. And I think there's some like Emmys, pre-Emmys videos they did, or they did some. There's a breakdown of Duel of the Snakes that Zach and Leo did, where they mention where all the themes are, because sometimes they're really subtle, or sometimes it'll be a theme over Kreese or over Johnny, and they'll be playing their theme but like really slow with a pad in the background, or like just on the basses and cellos, which usually doesn't carry the lead a lot. And sometimes, unless you really pay attention to it, because it's so slow. Sometimes it's a faster theme that's played really slowly. They're always interweaving the themes in there really well. Sometimes I don't even catch it. I'm like, oh man, that's actually like Johnny's theme or something. I didn't even notice the first time. So yeah, they're really good at that. Leitmotif is the term that you would use, having a theme against a certain character.
yeah, there's like a lot of Easter eggs, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, the music is full of Easter eggs. I mean, there's probably stuff that I haven't even noticed yet, even though I mixed a lot of it.
Yeah. So other than Zach and Leo, like who else are you collaborating with in Cobra Kai? Anyone else in the music department?
I mean, some of the musicians, they'll be sending me stuff directly sometime, or like maybe I'll have, not usually because now we have kind of a process in place, but I'll maybe ask them, like our drummer, like for different mic positions or miking things on the drum kits and see he records himself, and things like that. But mostly it's Zach and Leo. Then I deliver to Andres, our fantastic music editor, and he takes all of my mixes and make sure they're in sync. Because sometimes we'll work on a certain edit of the picture, and sometimes they'll re-edit the picture after we're working on the episode. So Andres is in charge of making sure everything's resynced and everything's in the right place. And then he's also editing all of the score against whatever songs are in the show. So I don't work on any of the songs. That just usually goes through Andres and goes directly to the re-recording mixers for the show. But those are the main two people that I work with.
Okay. And like when you send like your finalized score to the people who put it with like the dialogue and the sound effects, like is it just like a matter of like, okay, like they'll set it all to like they'll send that they'll put that one big file like to a certain volume, or does the volume ever get like kind of like lost with the with the dialogue and the sound effects where it's like you're like, okay, maybe I have to raise this instrument or something.
Yeah, they'll definitely they'll have a starting place, and that's part of my goal too. Is I'm hoping that when they put all of the pieces of music up and they set a certain like static level for it, hopefully for the most part they don't have to change it too much. My goal is not only to make the music sound good, but also mix it in a way that it's not conflicting too much with dialogue and sound effects and things like that. You know, I want the score to be able to blend easily with all those other elements. But they go all through. If you saw the automation is what we would call it, where they're actually programming in all the volume changes and rides, and usually they have a fader on their console that's all the music, and they'll be riding that up and down depending on where lines are. Sometimes we'll have moments where the music's supposed to be really loud, so that'll be all the way up, or jacked, and then it's got to tuck back for a dialogue line or a sound effects moment or something like that. But so I don't really interact with them much directly, and especially the earlier seasons when we first started working together. Typically, I like to, before I start any show or film or anything, I like to have a conversation with the re-recording mixers and then kind of know what they need and just introduce myself and tell them what stems I'm delivering, stuff like that. But I seem to remember the first season was kind of a whirlwind. It was like just a crazy production schedule. So I didn't actually get a chance to connect with them. So I haven't even, I'm probably going to connect with them now for Emmy stuff since I'm nominated with them as the sound mixing team. But every time I watch the show on Netflix or previously on YouTube, now on Netflix, I'm usually happy with the way the music was mixed in there. Music team, we're always going to be like, why isn't the music louder? But in general, they're really great at mixing. I feel like the music is at a good level throughout the show. So they do a great job at handling the music after we finish it.
Yeah. I just recently made a fan film. It's actually a Baby Yoda fan film. It's called Star Wars Baby Yoda. So, I composed some of the music for that, and like I'm not like, like I don't really. Once again, I'm not really good with technology, so I use GarageBand. So I just plugged my piano into GarageBand. But one of the main things which like I like spent like probably a full month on, because this was the most difficult part, was the sound. Like when I would upload it onto my computer, I watched the whole movie and it's perfect. Then I put it on the TV, or I watch it on my phone, and you get like this like vibration from one of the songs, and it's like you're looking at it on the computer and it's fine, but then like we watch it on another device. So how do you like kind of account for all those devices?
A lot of it's really that kind of just takes experience. I've been mixing for long enough now that because in here I have a big set of like really nice kind of, they're very accurate, they're not too pleasing, but they're kind of big full range speakers that I do most of my mixing on. If I know something's going to be released or listened to a lot on Spotify or something like that, sometimes I'll check it on like earbuds or something like that. But I just kind of have a general sense of, because sometimes I'll get sounds that are really mid-rangey or that have a lot of like low mid frequency resonances, and I know it's a vibe they're going for. It's like, or sometimes I'll get elements from composers that have like a low synth bass or something really with a lot of low end or big drums. And I want to maintain that. I'm like, okay, I know you want this to be epic and huge sounding, but part of my job sometimes is taming some of those, frequencies that are peaking, because I know like, oh, well, it sounds great on here on my really expensive fancy speakers, but I know if we play this on TV speakers, which let's be frank, a lot of people that watch Cobra Kai on Netflix probably watching on a phone or on an iPad or on earbuds or just on TV speakers. I would encourage everyone to at least get a sound bar, because that makes a huge difference. But realistically, yeah, a lot of people just use the built-in speakers on TVs, which on flat panel TVs, usually they're not great. But yeah, I know that some of those, like if it's a really, 200, 250 hertz, somewhere around there, low mids, it'll probably, make I've heard TVs rattle from sound mixes that come through there. So it's just kind of a knack. It's just kind of, I don't always at this point have to reference it on a consumer kind of things, just because I kind of know what I have a sensibility of kind of what things are going to trigger the, vibrations or things that aren't going to be as clear. But sometimes we still do that, but not as much as people that mix records that are going to be listened to in cars. That's going to be all on Spotify or on YouTube Music or Tidal or what have you. They usually have a smaller set of speakers, a more consumer set of speakers they'll check mixes back on. For scores, especially for me, it's not quite as necessary, because I'm going to be sending my mixes to another mixer and they're going to be blending it with the dialogue and sound effects. So there's a lot more that happens to the overall sound of the show before you guys hear it. But then we'll usually have an extra process between mastering, and sometimes we'll do separate mixes. Oftentimes I'll have another day or two before the soundtrack release comes out, because that obviously will mostly just be on CD, vinyl, Spotify, what have you, just listen to the music as its own. We'll give it a little bit different attention for the soundtrack release, since that won't be obviously mixed with dialogue and sound effects.
Yeah. How long has it taken you to like perfect, you know, your like your editing software to the point like where, because it's like it just seems like there's like so many different things. Like how long did it take for you to learn it, and are you still kind of learning it today?
Oh yeah, I mean everyone's still learning. Zach and Leo are still learning about writing music and programming synthesizers. I'm always learning about new mixing techniques. Any, especially creative professionals, but it probably applies to any professional. Like, you're always a sponge. You're always learning new things, and from any sources. I mean, I've learned stuff from people that are just starting out that do things that probably I would have thought was wrong, but I'd be like, oh, that's kind of an interesting technique, and that sounds cool. Maybe I'll try that in my mixing and things like that. But as far as, yeah, just, I mean, I am known for being pretty fast with Pro Tools, which is part of, just helps me get through the day and get through the amount of music, and kind of being fast at the software allows me to free up my brain a little bit to be creative and to, critically listen to things and stuff like that. But I mean, I've been using Pro Tools since I was 16. I got Pro Tools in 2004, like I said. So, I've been using the software for quite a while. But I'm still learning new things. I mean, I'm pretty proficient in Pro Tools, and there's still aspects of the software that I don't know everything about. So I'm even watching Pro Tools expert videos on YouTube and things like that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool new way to do automation or whatever have you. And they're always coming out with new features too. All the software is like constantly updated. So yeah, we're always learning. That's just how you keep life interesting, is just kind of learning new techniques and new ways to do things.
Yeah. As like an outsider looking in, it looks like the most impossible thing, but I guess like once you get the hang of it, it's kind of comes second nature a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
I forget. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, like why sometimes I feel like my job isn't that hard, but then I'd like try to watch some like an editor or like people doing color correction. I'm like, oh man, like I don't even like watching DaVinci Resolve or something like that. I know nothing about it. And I'm like, oh, that looks complicated. I'm like, oh, well, that's probably how they feel when they look at me in Pro Tools. Like, okay, I get it. Yeah, just because I've been immersed in this world for so long. But yeah, it becomes second nature. I mean, it's honestly, I don't like always comparing mixing to playing an instrument, because I'm not actually generating any sounds. I'm processing things, but the methodology is kind of the same, where like really you're kind of learning frequencies and equalizers and different, how to listen to things critically, and how to kind of set up my template in different levels, and how to always be balancing. I'm always making sure that the overall level of especially these really big cues don't get too loud. And so I'm kind of, a lot of times if something's not loud enough, a lot of times I'd be like, well, I don't need to turn that up. I actually need to turn other things down, because if I just keep turning things up, then eventually the whole thing is distorted and way too loud and stuff like that. So that definitely, those kind of sensibilities just becomes instinctual, the same way that, a guitar player doesn't really think about how they're going to play the guitar. They're listening to the rest of the band or whatever other musicians they're playing with, and they just play. They have a general idea of what chords they're going to play or the melody or things like that, but they're not thinking about exactly where their hand should go or how they're going to strum. It's just kind of, a lot of that becomes subconscious. And mixing kind of gets to the same place, where I'm sometimes not even thinking, I'm just kind of doing things, just reacting to what I'm hearing, and like, oh, well, let me try that and EQ that, or, put this effect on this or what have you.
Yeah. When I like record my music, like I'll have like that one instrument that sounds like so nice, and I'm like, I just want to like blast it. Like I don't even care, like because it's just so nice. It has to be loud, especially like in a fight scene. But then it's like, oh no, like it's becoming vibraty, and then it's like
Yeah.
a whole frustration thing. Gotta lower it, like
Yeah. I mean, really a lot of music production, and it comes the same thing with composing and with any other creative thing, is it's like, you can easily probably learn how to use all the tools, all the software and the synthesizers and the virtual instruments and whatever, but really it comes down to developing a taste. And that's so subjective too. It's, sometimes it's just sort of is an innate sensibility of what you should do with a certain thing. Because that's why I'm totally fine opening up my sessions and showing people my complete Pro Tools sessions. Some engineers traditionally had been like afraid of like their magic secret sauce settings for drum kits or whatever, but it's like, you guys could like take all my settings from the drum kit from Duel of the Snakes and put it on a drum kit from something else, another player, another drum kit, a different room. It's probably not going to work. It's not going to sound the same, because it's not the same drummer. It's not the same room. It's not the same microphones. Like I have no qualms with showing people how I do things, because ultimately the way that I got to those settings for that specific piece of music was me reacting to what I'm hearing and deciding to make an EQ move or make a level change or pan something. So mixing for me really is all about reacting. And, you know, the only way you can learn that is just doing it a lot and listening to a lot of music. I'm always listening to music of all different genres. And I'm not always consciously like trying to, you know, zero in like, oh, what's the reverb on that vocal or what's that? But, you know, I pick up stuff because I just have music on in the background all day when I'm not actually mixing, and stuff will pop out like, oh, that's a really cool drum sound. Like, you know, what do I think they did for that? Or, you know, or this song has really loud drums, or the drums are somehow in the background, or different things like that, or different, you know, vocal levels or what have you. Just kind of, that's how you're always learning. You're listening to new music and just kind of learning what other people do, and then, you know, integrating that into your own work.
Yeah. Was Duel of the Snakes the most like, was that theme like did that have the most instruments and like different things going on at once out of all of them?
Pretty much. That's why I picked that one, because I was like, well, if I'm going to make a mixing tutorial, I might as well show like a big, epic, giant, thick cue that has just tons of elements going on. Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything, because that, you know, the one that I did on the YouTube video was just one. I think there's maybe 6 cues or something that all, you know, play back to back that make up that whole, like, what is it, 10 and a half, 12-minute sequence.
Yeah.
That was big. Then also the Carol the Bells one. I'm trying to, is it Carol the Cobras, or I'm trying to remember the actual name.
Carol
Yeah.
the Cobras.
Yeah, that one had a lot of elements too, because that was, you know, basically it was kind of like going back and forth between like big Cobra Kai orchestra, and then it was like a pseudo Trans-Siberian orchestra kind of thing, you know. So I mean, because an orchestra by itself playing loud sounds big and sounds huge. A rock band playing by themselves is big and loud and huge. And then trying to combine them together, that's sometimes where the challenge is to, you know, figure out how to get that to all work together. I mean, it's well orchestrated, and that's really, you know, there's a famous mix engineer, Bob Clearmountain, who's like a legend in my industry. And he always says like the key to a great mix is a great arrangement. And it's really true. Like Zach and Leo, and then our orchestrator Vinny does a great job of orchestrating the orchestra so that, you know, Zach and Leo's intention for the orchestra, it sounds the way it should based on how he's going to allocate different notes basically to different musicians in the orchestra. So it all comes in with a pretty good direction. So it's not that hard, but it's still, you know, it's a lot of colliding frequencies and elements that kind of have to blend together. So sometimes it's a challenge just to figure out who's taking the lead.
Yeah. And one of the newest things with the music recently was the cassettes and the vinyl tapes. Were you involved in like mixing for that?
I mean, those are all my mixes. They, I believe, hired a separate mastering engineer, because that's really the art of mastering really started back when in the vinyl days, because we used to always record and mix with tape. So we'd have magnetic tape would be the, you know, multi-track. We'd go through an analog console with all this outboard gear, and then we'd mix it down to a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch 2-track tape. And that sounded phenomenal. But then getting that tape mix to translate onto vinyl, it wasn't just a transfer. It wasn't like we can do now, like digitally, just, you know, going from one device to another. There was an art. You'd have to re-EQ it, and you'd have to figure out. Vinyl's really tough because like you can't have too much bass in vinyl, because bass makes the groove wider, and when the big groove is going up and down like this, and the needle's going up and down, sometimes you can get the needle to jump if there's too much bass. So that's why a lot of older music sometimes doesn't have quite as much low end, just because it wouldn't sound good on vinyl. So that was the old, you know, master engineers still have a great place in our industry, but the origin of their profession was really trying to get mixes that were on magnetic tape to translate well to vinyl, because it is a very different sort of medium. So that I leave that to professional mastering engineers to try to get the mixes to translate well to other formats. Yeah, and I'm excited for that release. I haven't gotten mine yet either, so it's coming.
That's really cool. I actually got the vinyl on the cassette. Zach and Leo sent it to me.
Oh, well, Zach's listening, so send me mine. No, I know they are. I'm busy, so we're all busy.
You know, I don't have a like a record player, but I do. My grandparents, it's like perfect. They gave me their old car, and it has a cassette player, and I was like, first time I've used a cassette player, and I'm like, I hope this works. Like, I didn't really know what side to put it on, and then I put it in, and it got stuck, and I'm like, did I do it right? But it's supposed to get stuck. It's supposed to look like it, you know, it doesn't like go in all the way. Kind of like,
oh yeah.
So I didn't know that. So
like the little door opens, and yeah, I mean, I haven't used a cassette tape in like 20 years, but yeah, those are all memories that those of us that are older have of the older technologies. I mean, I honestly don't have a turntable in here yet either. I have a few, especially Cobra Kai. There's a couple other scores that are now getting released on vinyl. So I'm like, I probably should get a turntable set up in here, especially since I'm getting all these of my own mixes on vinyl.
Yeah, I just found it like really cool that they did that. You know, went with the Johnny Lawrence style.
Well, the great part about vinyl too, really, is the actual case itself, because you get a giant picture of the cover, which is so cool. I mean, a lot of vinyl you can just put on the wall; it's like art. And then you open it up; there's so much room inside for all the credits and liner notes and all that kind of stuff. You know, fortunately, I'm glad that Tidal and I think Spotify now are coming back with liner notes and, you know, not only credits, because, you know, I'm being biased that it's great to actually finally have credits again, because in Spotify and Tidal, if it was submitted correctly, you can see, like, you can click on the more info, you can see like mixed by Phil McGowan or mixed by whoever and recording and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, with the digital age, before they started doing that, we kind of lost all that. We lost all the credits for musicians and for engineers and master engineers and arrangers and stuff like that. And then liner notes too, because a lot of that was one of the fun things about getting a CD or a vinyl album was, you know, the however many paragraphs that the artist wrote about like the process and what inspired them, or like if it's a score, what the, you know, scoring the project was like. So that's really one of the cool parts about vinyl, is just all the extra physical stuff you get.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like surprised how much like how many different like things were in there, like all these different notes, and like you open like a box and there's another box. And
yeah, we lose that with Spotify. I mean, like, there's an instant gratification with digital, obviously, which is great, but yeah, it's fun like waiting for UPS to show up, or USPS with your vinyl, and then opening it up, and yeah, that's kind of a lost excitement, I guess, that we have this day and age.
yeah, right now the vinyls for me are just decoration because I don't have a player, but I'm like on the hunt. Like I
Oh yeah,
gotta.
well, I have my I think season 2 like double CD just kind of up there. They signed it for me, and it's like, yeah, like a piece of art in my studio now.
Oh,
Because
that's
I imported the CD into my computer, and then I'm like, all right, well, I'll just put this on the wall now. Like, it looks nice.
that's awesome. I like it's my grandparents' cars just saved me because like all the bonus tracks were only on the CD, and I didn't have a CD player until now.
Oh.
Now the car comes, I have a CD player, I have a cassette player. Like it's just.
Well, that is the problem for me now. I have been buying CDs because that still is the easiest way to get full quality CD quality. I mean, Tidal now will play back full quality, which helps a lot. But before I got Tidal, the only way to get 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz wave files was to buy the CD and import it into my computer. So I was doing that for a while with soundtrack albums I really cared about. But I upgraded the new Mac Pro recently, and that has no CD drive. I have an older one that I can use now, but I might actually, this sounds weird, but I might have to buy an external CD, like USB Thunderbolt CD drive, to like play old CDs or import them when I get them. So yeah, it's definitely, digital physical media is definitely dying, but it's cool that vinyl and somewhat cassettes are coming back. I mean, cassettes have a vibe. They're not the highest fidelity. Vinyl definitely sounds better than tape, though. I mean, better is, it's subjective. Some things just kind of sound cool on tape.
Yeah.
On cassette tape, you know, cassette tape's different than like the tape we'll use in the studio. The magnetic tape, that's a whole other level of quality, and that sounds fantastic. If it's like a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch, you know, reel to reel tape, those are like some of the highest fidelity analog you can get.
Yeah. April Terry says, looking forward to what will happen with the Sam and Robbie theme in season 4. And I'm definitely, because when I heard that extended version, I love that extended version. So I'm hoping we'll definitely get that theme, because we know it's like the Miguel Sam theme. It's just a different rendition, but I'm hoping we get that guitar kind of like, you know, the Robbie Sam, like that specific theme. So hopefully.
So if I reveal what happens, do I get $6.99 Canadian dollars? Is that what that means?
Well, I think this person's looking for like a true or false. Will there be a Sam and Robbie theme in season 4?
You'll have to wait and see. Yeah, I can't reveal, especially because
Kidding.
Zach's watching, so you know he might get mad at me. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I would like post like, because like when he would like make like teases about the season 3 score, and I would post YouTube videos like, okay, like I think that like he posted a theme that played when TORY and Sam fought, so that means they're gonna have a rematch. And then he's like, you know, he was like, dude, like you're figuring out the whole thing, like you're gonna get me in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope I didn't already say too much with that montagey piece, but I think I've kept it pretty vague.
Yeah, it could literally mean anything. So,
Yeah.
but just something to get excited about. So, um, so, you said you see the footage when you're mixing. Like, do you find it like kind of like imperative, like that you like watch the footage like before mixing? Like you have to know like what's going on in the scene. Like, how important is that to when you're doing the music?
I don't need to review it ahead of time. Like I said, I still haven't watched down. I never really watch down like from beginning to end in real time, usually, because I often just don't have time once I'm done mixing everything. I'm on to another show the next day or whatever. Um, but it helps to see what's going on, to know what's going on in the scene. I mean, the biggest thing for me is having the rough dialogue and sound effects audio tracks that I can turn on, so I can take the music mix I'm doing, turn it down a little bit, kind of mimicking what they'll probably do at the dub, and then turn on the rough dialogue and sound effects, and at least know where the dialogue lines are. Like, oh, there's going to be a big explosion here, a car is going to be driving off, or a big motorcycle, or something like that. Like, it's all rough. It doesn't. I mean, if you guys heard the rough stuff that we get from the picture editors, it's not cleaned up yet. It's not even what the sound designers have done. Like a picture editor who actually cuts the video, the images, they'll have like a small sound effects library. They'll just put like if there's a gunfight, it'll be like the same gunshot over and over again, because that's they're not sound editors. That's not their job. So a lot of it's very rough and just gives us a loose idea. And then the dialogue too, it has noise from the set, and sometimes they'll have big generators or fans, and that's all still in there, and it's not cleaned up yet. So sometimes it's kind of hard to listen to, but we know, like, oh well, the sound team is going to really clean this all up, and they're going to do really great sound design, then it'll blend well. So that's really what helps for me, just to know what's going on acoustically in the scene. And then obviously, being able to see what's going on helps to understand what the scene's all about and kind of what's happening. Sometimes I will ask, if there's enough time on films, I'll sometimes ask the sound mixer, the recording mixers, like, hey, do you have like a rough print of like the cleaned up dialogue and sound effects you can send me? And every now and then I get like a rough effects stem and a rough dialogue stem, and that's really helpful, because then I unmute those and turn my music down a little bit, and I'm like, oh, it sounds pretty close to probably what the final is going to sound like, and really can give me an idea of how it fits into the sort of acoustic palette.
Yeah. And how much of the I'm curious, like, because there's so much music on this show, like people don't realize that it's not just what's on the tracks. Like there's like every time, like there's pretty much music in every single scene. So are you involved with all of that? Do you do everything that we hear on the show?
Anything that Zach and Leo work on, I probably will be mixing in the show. They do. I mean, if it's a song, if it's like an actual song from the 80s, 90s now, that it just goes straight to Andres, and Andres will edit it into place. And then usually I'm pretty sure we have a music supervisor in the show that helps select the songs for certain scenes. But any original music written for the show usually flows through me before it goes to the final dub. And yeah, there are some episodes where it's not a ton of music. Some of the middle episodes where they're just kind of developing story and developing characters and things like that, there's not nearly as much. So then it's not nearly as much work for me, because there's not as many minutes of music in an episode. But yeah, at the end of every season, usually the last few episodes gets bigger and bigger. Than like the one that we're nominated for, 310, was, I don't think it was wall to wall. I think there's a couple times where the music stops, and that's actually good. Sometimes we'll actually, well, usually the composer's not me, but a lot of times music, sometimes we'll actually ask, like, hey, can we like have a little less music? Because sometimes it just gets exhausting if the score never stops. But yeah, the big episodes, sometimes it's a lot of minutes of music.
Yeah. So even when like there's like certain parts where there's like just like one note, or like kind of like one guitar strike, like when a character comes in or something, like is that do you have to mix that?
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes I'll have cues that are just like 10-second cues, but there's live guitar. Sometimes there's a little drum thing. That's a drum multi-track that I have to mix and make sound good. Or sometimes the orchestra just does a little stinger, like a little rise and kind of thing. Like that all has to be, because it was recorded, so it has to flow through me for me to mix it down to the elements, the subgroup elements that I send off to the dub. So yeah, I mean, those usually go quicker. So that I save those for the end of the day because they're easier. But yeah, it all flows through me.
Yeah. So like to put it into perspective, like for fans who um you get the kind of like the demo track from Zach and Leo, but can you compare like kind of like how you enhance it? Like what differentiates both versions, like, and like makes like the final version that you do like considered the better one?
I mean, I always want to maintain the intention of the music, because also what the producers or director or whoever's actually giving Zach and Leo creative notes on the music, what they approved and what they signed off on, said this is good, is their reference mix. It's before it was recorded with orchestra. It's before usually it has Andrew and Sam, the guitars and drums and things like that. So I always pay attention to those, because it gives me an idea of, like, especially globally, like, oh, I can hear in the reference mix that the drums are really in front in this cue. Or maybe sometimes we have conversations where Zach will have to remind me, or Leo be like, oh, hey, the drums are supposed to be really reverby and like epic 80s, like that's what was in the demo, so I need to replicate that on my end with the live drums that were recorded. So I like to consider what I do is basically like sonically the demos are maybe like 80 to 90% there, and I'm bringing that like last 10 to 15%, which can take a lot to kind of get that final sheen on things and kind of get that final impression. But that's probably what you would notice at the end of my mixing video with Duel of the Snakes, is like you go back and forth. It's still the same piece of music. All the elements are still in there, but hopefully mine just sounds a little bit bigger, a little wider, basically just the sort of amplified, version of the same thing, but taken to 11 with that extra, punch and power and clarity.
Yeah. And I know we mentioned this before, but like what are like the limitations you have? Because like you say like you want to like keep the integrity of the original track, but you're also like mixing it and like you want to be like creative. So how do you kind of balance that?
I guess it's sometimes I have to rein in how crazy I go with things, or like sometimes I'll try to put a really cool like vintage delay on a guitar, and then like Zach and Leo will be like, what's that delay? Like, take that off. It's too much. I'm like, okay, fine. So I mean, that's the back and forth that we have. That's always fun. But I think the biggest limitations I have is just not doing anything that's going to conflict too much with dialogue and with sound effects. So not making something too massively epic, or one element that eats up a lot of the mid-range frequencies or things like that. Because it could sound cool, but on its own when we're doing the music, but then you try to blend it with dialogue and it just eats up the whole, sonic sort of information during that scene. So usually what that would result in is, if we delivered something like that, they'll turn the music way down, because if you can't understand the dialogue and the music's interfering with it, they're going to turn the music down, and we don't want that if we can avoid it. We want the music to stay at a listenable level, at least, where you can still notice that it's there and hear it. So that's really kind of what I'm thinking about whenever I try anything bold with EQ, or with like pushing elements up. Just have to kind of rein it in to a certain degree to make sure it's not conflicting with dialogue, because dialogue in film and TV is like the lead vocal in a song. It always has to be in the forefront. I mean, we could get into, Christopher Nolan doesn't always think so, and he has creative reasons for sometimes having the dialogue buried, but in general, usually the dialogue's always in the forefront, always super clear, understandable, and things like that. So yeah, and then also just, I try to limit myself sometimes. If I try something a little out of the box or a little wacky, I'll always go back and reference the demo mix from Zach and Lee and be like, all right, well, does this completely change the vibe or the sound or the style of the cue? Because I don't want to go too far outside of the window that they wrote the music in. And that can be a careful balancing act. I mean, that's something I found on like a score like Vikings or Ozark even, which are very dark scores. They're kind of murky and reverby and everything's filtered out. It all sounds like this. Everything's kind of distorted and it's a really cool sound, but I kind of have to balance between, well, if you go too far with distortion or with filters, it gets so murky and muddy sounding sometimes that it's hard to mix it with dialogue and effects. So I come in to kind of like bring it in the middle. I don't want to clean it up. I don't want to make it pristine, because that's the wrong direction. You don't want it to be super clear and nice sounding. It still should be dirty and gritty, but still kind of work with dialogue. So that's sometimes the challenge I have, is trying to get, dark, murky stuff. And there's some cues in Cobra Kai that are like that too. Trying to maintain the intention and the creativity, but also make it work with the other elements.
And Zach and Leo are the ones who they actually make that original tape that they send to you? They create that?
I mean, I think they probably have a they don't like like duplicate it at their place. Like they hire there's companies that do vinyl pressings and tapes and things like that. You mean for the soundtrack releases?
Oh, sorry. I meant like the demo that they sent for you, like the recording, the soundtrack. Yeah.
Oh, the demo, that's just part of the delivery to me. So it's just the stereo mix of whatever, when they write the music, they write it in, I think they both use Cubase. They write it in software, and like the orchestra is all fake. It's all samples. Zach will play guitars, and we'll sometimes use those because Zach's a guitar player too. So there's stuff in there that still makes it from the sort of splits that I get from them. And then any they'll do like taiko drums and surdos and like big epic film score percussion, and that's all just whatever they did in their sequencer, that's what I'll use in the mix, because we're not going to re-record that stuff because it already sounds great. So when they deliver all those elements to me, I also get one file that's like the reference mix or the stereo demo mix, which is where they left it off and what they sent to the producers and the showrunners to get approved. So I always have that on a track. I have a fader on my controller here that's always, I can always just hit 2 buttons and I can be listening to in time too. It's all in sequence with the picture and stuff like that, so I can always hear where they left it off before we recorded stuff and it came to me.
Oh, cool. And have you met John, Josh, and Hayden? Do you work with them?
I actually haven't yet. Yeah, I've only met. I mean, I know pretty much everybody on the music team. I mean, I don't usually attend the recording sessions because they just kind of have it on their own. Zach and Leo will go to Sam or Andrew's place to record guitars and drums and all that, and they don't really need me there. I mean, I'd love to go hang out, but I'm not necessary at that point because they got it covered. But I know all those people. But yeah, I haven't met them yet. I mean, maybe there'll be some Emmys event or something where I'll get to meet those guys sometime.
Have you spoken to them like online or?
Not even that. I mean,
Oh, wow.
I'll like retweet their stuff on Twitter and stuff like that. But typically, there's so many people in so many departments. I'm one person in the music department, and then that's why when you go see a movie, there's just like endless credits because there's just so many people that all our work combined comes out with the final product. But it'd be impossible, I think, for any director or producer to know everybody.
Yeah,
hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. It's a big movie.
It's like crazy how when you see the credits, like I was looking on the IMDb of Cobra Kai and it just doesn't end. It's like costume, music. It's like you think, okay, maybe it's a couple people. No, it's like every little thing has like its own credit.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, it's got to be. I was talking to Zach and Leo when we were finishing up season 4. Like, Cobra Kai has to be one of the most produced 30-minute TV shows out there. Just because I mean, a lot of what we're doing is basically like a film. It's like as far as the cinematography and the acting, and the writing, and the music production, the sound effects. Like, really, it's kind of cinematic.
Yeah, and it's like so much more efficient because it was finished in. It just wrapped now, and they started filming back in January. So that's pretty quick, like to do like all that stuff. But I guess you have so many people working on everything that helps it out a lot.
Yeah, the bigger the team, the faster you can go. I mean, that's an old saying that my professors in college told me. The difference between, at least for sound, New York post-production, usually they have a small team working long, so they have a few people working for a long time. LA, they work wide and short, so it's like you look at a big like a Christopher Nolan movie or something like that. I mean, there might be like 30 sound effects editors or something like that, but they're all working on different parts of the same scene at the same time, so that's how they can get so much detail and so many things done. And that's just one team. Then that's why like a Marvel film, I just saw Suicide Squad in the theaters, and we waited through the credits because there was an after credits thing, which isn't a spoiler, but if you guys see Suicide Squad, stay to the end. But yeah, I was just like, oh, there's another visual effects company, another visual effects company, another visual effects company, because they're all working on different special effects shots throughout the film. Like one company might just do like 10 shots that are really complicated, but then another company does another 10 shots, and they just have to do it at the same time just for scheduling, I'm assuming. As far as what I don't know a lot about visual effects, but at least that's the production process and the sound and music. But every one of those companies has like the same people that are just working on that thing. So yeah, that's how you get 15-minute credit rolls.
Yeah. And do you have like a kind of like a general like rule of thumb for like how long the music actually takes to mix? So like maybe like a 3-minute theme or a 2-minute theme, like how long would like those usually take?
I mean, it depends obviously on the thickness of the queue, how tall the queue is, like how many elements there are in there. Like tallness meaning like how long it takes me to scroll from the top to the bottom of the Pro Tools session. But usually I estimate when someone hires me for a project, I say I can probably get through 15 to 20 minutes of music in a single day. depending on, also it depends on how much consistency there is. Like, some films, if it's just going to be one multi-track recording of live orchestra and like a couple of pads and things like that, once I get one cue done, I can import all of the settings I did for the orchestra to the next cue, and that gets me a starting place. And then I'm just sort of massaging levels, and I can move on. And if there's a lot of consistency like that, where I can reuse settings because it's the same sound just in a different piece of music, or the same element in a different piece of music, that goes faster. But then, that's why some of these Cobra Kai episodes, I need more time, because a lot of these later episodes in the seasons, it's just a mishmash. Like, there's some rock cues, there's some electro cues, and there's the big orchestral cues, and there's cues where everything's all happening at the same time. So it sometimes when there's a change of style or of instrumentation, it takes me a little bit longer, because I can't, I kind of have to start from, not from scratch, but kind of have to start from a different place and kind of get everything kind of dialed in. So yeah, that's usually what I book because I just work by day usually on a project.
Okay. And Zach and Leo, they send you the tracks like as they record, so like you're all kind of doing your job at the same time.
Yeah, or usually, if I have like one day, booked for an episode, they'll be sending me stuff ahead of time. And sometimes, even though I'm working on other stuff, I might take a break and be like, all right, let me like wrangle all the Cobra Kai elements and like just get them all in folders and kind of organized, so that, because I hate starting a day where I'm just like, all right, let me figure out like all these folders and download links. And, it's sometimes it's just like data management is sometimes a big part of the job. So yeah, when they might be recording drums 3 days before I'm going to mix. So usually they'll send me email me a link or something, and so I'll maybe download that and tuck that away. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to need this 3 days from now. Let me just get it downloaded and put there and make sure I have it. And sometimes we'll also have like Google Docs with check boxes, so we know what we need. Excuse me, and like can just keep organized, so make sure we have everything. Because it does get complicated, when like these 6 cues have drum kit, and then these other 6 cues have guitars, and then these 3 cues have both drums and guitars, and then these cues have live orchestra, and they're trying to, it's not all the same. So trying to, just keep track of what needs what, and then I can make sure that I have received everything so that it gets into the mix.
Yeah. And it takes like, how does it take? Is it like a month, like kind of months for you to work on the music, or for?
I mean, no, like it's usually 1 day per episode, and then except for if it's a big episode, like I think for last season, I think 305 maybe I had 2 days for. I can't remember, because that was a big episode. And then definitely for 310 and maybe 309 as well, I think I had 2 days for each of those episodes, because we just knew ahead of time exactly, we were like, it's a lot of music, you're going to need more time. And sometimes they'll just send me that reference mix I'm talking about. Sometimes they'll just send me that, so I can just listen to it, and I can kind of listen to my, okay, yeah, I hear all these elements. There's a ton of stuff in there. Yeah, okay, I can kind of guesstimate how long it's going to take, or that I'll need, an extra day of time or whatever. And then also having more time also just means too that Zach and Leo have more time to give me feedback and like fine tune things, because we don't have enough time. Like, I'll do my mix, and then I'll maybe only have time to do a couple tweaks, and then we're out of time. So sometimes more time isn't necessarily just because there's so much music, but it's so that they can really, work with me to fine tune things to get it, exactly how they want it.
Yeah. So for season 4, like when did you like first start mixing, and then like when was like the last day? How long did the whole entire process take?
I mean, it's probably spread out over a few months, but like I said, it's like just 1 day at a time. So I think usually for Cobra Kai, we'll do, 2 or 3 episodes at a time, because usually we try to record the orchestra in Eastern Europe, like 1 or 2 sessions for like a bulk of episodes. So then I'll do like 2 or 3 days of Cobra Kai, and then it'll be like a few weeks until I do another couple of days, and then another few weeks, and then another couple of days, just because that's how that's how they're writing things too. They're writing an episode, and then once all that's approved, then it goes to Vinny to orchestrate, and it goes to the musicians to record. Eventually that all gets to me, and everything's kind of overlapped.
Yeah. Have you ever had like a moment or like something happen where like maybe like something gets like deleted, or like something gets lost, and like all you guys are kind of like scrambling? Anything like that ever happen?
That's rare, and it is a bad day if you totally lose something. Fortunately, with Dropbox and with backups and with Time Machine and with all the technology we have and process too, I'm pretty good at. I'm always archiving stuff to make sure that because I have accidentally deleted things. I'm like, oh, thank God I have the backup. Let me dig that up and replace it. But more often than not, it's more just like with the big episodes where there's a ton of cues and that all have a ton of elements, or a lot of them do. sometimes like, yeah, I'll do a mix, and then like Zach or Leo listen to be like, oh crap, there's like a couple elements missing from this that we forgot to send you. Let me get that over to you. And then they'll send me that. Then I'll integrate it. Just because, you know, at the end, like everyone's so tired and like getting everything all together. Sometimes, yeah, there's just, but usually it's just like, oh, let me send that over. And it's, you know, we try to keep it low stress because there's no reason to freak out about it. We can fix it. We'll make it work.
Yeah. And you've mixed music for films, television, and video games. So I'm curious, like, is there like a different approach you have like when you're mixing each of them, or is it kind of just the same thing every time?
These days, it's pretty much the same. Especially, you know, now that we're in the golden era of television, where TV really is becoming a lot more cinematic, or has become a lot more cinematic. Or like Cobra Kai. I mean, the way that I mix all those big cues, I mean, that's really the same way that I'd mix a big giant film score. Like, I mean, and a lot of that music really could fit into a Marvel film or something like that. And the production technique would be the same. You know, we just maybe be recording in London or something like that and have more time. And then, or I'd be mixing in surround sound, which is usually what I do for a lot of TV shows and films. But as far as the approach, it's really all three of those now are kind of the same because everything's kind of become like film music, you know, especially over the last 20 years. Like, you know, Hans Zimmer's been doing video games, and other big like film composers are starting to do video game scores now. And then so really, yeah, from my perspective, the only difference is what format I might be in, or like I have to be careful about certain calibration levels depending what the medium is going to be. Like video games, sometimes they want the music a lot more like a record. They want it more compressed, more mastered, if you will, for lack of a better term. So because it's going to be fighting against, you know, like I've worked on a bunch of Call of Duty games, and like they want the music louder for that because it's going to be gunshots and explosions and all this other sound effects going on. And for a video game, you know, everything is playing back live. It's basically being mixed live by a program, an audio engine. So if the music's a little bit more consistent level wise, it's easier just like because music will just be at a level, and then, you know, all the dialogue moments and explosions and gunshots are being triggered by whatever the player is doing. So yeah, sometimes those need to be a little bit more compressed. And sometimes also, I think like the last Call of Duty game I did, I still mix at a reasonable level, stuff that's not like super mastered. And then the composer sometimes will have their own pass of like, they're like, okay, I know it needs to be super compressed or whatever. And they'll do that before it goes into the game. And then, you know, the mixes that go on the soundtrack are my more reasonable, you know, more dynamic mixes that aren't super loud.
Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of those like games. Like I've just played like Jedi Fallen Order recently, like the
Oh,
Star Wars
phenomenal
game.
music. Yeah. Gordy
Oh,
Haben, Stephen Barton. Yeah, did an amazing job.
oh,
And then
you're
Al
familiar with
Myerson.
it?
Oh, yeah. I finished that game. Well, my wife works for Electronic Arts. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, I get hookups for some of the games.
Oh, sick.
But I haven't worked on, I mean, the last EA game I worked on was Dragon Age Inquisition a few years ago. So I haven't worked on an EA game in a while. But the Star Wars stuff, I haven't played Squadrons yet, but I've been meaning to. But
Oh,
phenomenal music. I was very impressed with the music for Jedi Fallen Order. And then Alan Myerson, who's one of my heroes, recorded and mixed all that. You know, and they went to London to Abbey Road with a full orchestra, and like, yeah, it sounds amazing. Really good job.
yeah. It's like because it's not just like a Call of Duty. It's like literally a movie. It's a I don't know how long it is, but like you know, it's like a full like movie. You got the story, and when you're not like playing or killing, like you're watching, and then like the music is just phenomenal. So like I agree. Like things like are like kind of even video games are now starting to sound like films, like same level score.
Yeah, and that game really is like playing a movie. Like it's very cinematic, and those are the kind of games I like. I mean, I don't play nearly as much video games as I used to, but I was a huge gamer when I was a kid and in college. But yeah, I want a game that has like a story that has, you know, things going on. You know, I'm not as much into because I'm not very fast. Even though I'm definitely faster at Pro Tools than I am at any video game. So like if I try to play like Counter Strike or anything like that, I just keep dying. Like I'm not fast enough with like the controller and stuff to like, you know, kill the other guy before I get killed in those games.
Yeah. So wait, so what does your wife do for EA?
She does event production, so she's not really involved in like the creation of the games or anything like that.
Oh, okay. But like all the like the events they hold, like she like runs that.
Yeah, like, you know, around E3 every year they have EA Play, which is like a big event that they do. So she's hugely involved in like planning all that and logistics and all that kind of stuff. But it's cool that we both have jobs in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, both like connections.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. She works with the VP of music sometimes, and like he knows me from Dragon Age and from some other, from more like film score industry stuff. So it's kind of fun. Like that when they're talking, and it's the Steve Schnurr is his name. He's a music executive at EA. So it's kind of funny that she's like, "Oh yeah, I know Phil. Like Phil's in the industry and stuff like that." So it's funny how that kind of collides.
Yeah. So what would you say is the hardest part about being a mixer, especially for Cobra Kai?
Honestly, this is what I've been saying in interviews is scheduling. Scheduling is the hardest part. I mean, even just now, like I said, I was supposed to be working on something later today, but that just got pushed, and it got pushed into next week, and next week's full. So now I got to like juggle stuff around, and yeah, when because given that I only work, like a 1 day per episode of TV or like a film, maybe I'll sometimes only be working on it for 3 to 5, 6 days. It means I'm usually working on a wide variety of projects throughout the year, and things are always moving. I mean, that's the entertainment industry. Stuff is always usually pushing later. Usually they're delaying things later, but then like a project will delay 2 weeks later into a time I have booked for another project. So then I got to try to shuffle things around, and yeah, that's definitely the most frustrating part of my job. Is just trying to schedule everything. But as far as the actual work, um, it's probably just like I said, it's really just getting a handle on file management and all the organization stuff, which I've developed a pretty good system of keeping track of stuff. Because if you don't, then yeah, and you get to I'll open up a Pro Tools session for a queue, and then if I have to spend 30 minutes trying to figure out where everything is and where to get everything, if I hadn't organized it ahead of time, it's just slowing down time that I could be mixing. So that's definitely can be a challenge, but if everyone gets a system in place eventually, sort of an organizational system to make sure they have everything in the right place.
And you've done like a lot of you've done a ton of projects, like different films, shows, video games, as we mentioned. So how does like Cobra Kai and the music of Cobra Kai stand out from like all those other things? What like separates it?
I mean, it's just super unique because I don't think there's any other project where I'm mixing like 80s hair metal with orchestra, like it's definitely has a very unique sound, and especially one that kind of throws back to music and movies and things that both Zach Leo and myself grew up with. Um, and it's definitely some of the like most produced music, especially the later seasons, that I've mixed on stuff that I'm really definitely will probably go on. Like, I mean, I don't send out mixing reels that often now because I have clients already and a lot of work, but definitely some of the music from season 3 and season 4 will be going on my mixing reels, and if someone wants to hear stuff that I've worked on. Just because, yeah, I mean, it's great music and it's really good performances by all the musicians that we hire. And just, epic. I mean, it's just big, epic music, which is really fun.
And it's Emmy nominated, so I mean,
yeah, we'll see. September 11th. That's the Creative Arts Emmy Day for Cobra Kai. I'm actually not even sure how I'm going to find out because I don't think they're like live streaming it or anything. But yeah, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
yeah, we're praying for it. So, who would you say from your personal life, like someone like who had like the biggest impact on like who you are today and like what you're doing?
That's a tough question because there's been a lot of people. I mean, definitely, my parents were very supportive of me going into music. I had friends at Berkeley when I was at school that like, they're like, oh, my dad just wants me to be a lawyer, and he's like just putting up with me being at music school. I never had that. I was fortunate that they're very supportive of me going into the arts and going into music and things like that. Then all of my music teachers, especially early on, like my band director in high school, who I was just on vacation in Maine where I grew up, and I stopped and had dinner with him because he's hugely influential, introducing me to all sorts of different music. He's a huge John Williams fan and film music in general. So I definitely learned new like film music, different scores to listen to and things like that from him. And then just inspiring me to love music and to listen to music in different ways and things like that. Then I had a lot of great professors in college that were phenomenal. And that helped usher me along and kind of introduce me to people or introduce me to new techniques or new people in the industry and things like that. And then yeah, I mean, Greg Townley, the guy I was talking about earlier, he's the first connection I had in LA. I could trace back pretty much everyone I know in Hollywood back to him, because it was my first foot in the door. And then he introduced me to some people. Those people introduced me to other people, and then it all kind of stems from there. So yeah, it's hard to pin down one person, but I'd say yeah, anybody who was helpful in sort of my development and inspiration. Because it's not even just people that were engineers that taught me stuff. It's also just people that love music and just, introduce you to new music or introduce you to new ways to listen to music. And yeah, now that I'm kind of, had of a certain level of success, I'm trying to, kind of introduce that to other people as well.
Yeah, that's great. So Zach and Leo, they've described, as you mentioned, like Cobra Kai has like all these like different genres, and they've like kind of split it up into like the three categories: the Miyagi, the Cobra Kai, then you got like the kids in the high school. So like I'm curious, like which style you prefer mixing the most.
Um, I mean, I love them all because they're so fun in different ways. I mean, it's probably the most fun for me to mix any of the like rock stuff that has guitars and drums, and we're kind of just doing straight up rock music because I don't get the chance to mix that often. That's not usually these days typically what's featured in scores, so that's kind of unique for me. Big orchestral music is, that's in a fair amount of things that I work on. Though the Cobra Kai version of that, of course, is always fun and really great. But yeah, it's cool that I get the opportunity to mix some genres that I don't usually run into in film music. So yeah, those are some of the more fun because I get to bust out, emulations of like reverb boxes from the 80s and things like that, and kind of like getting these vintage sounds and things like that are not as typical in film music, so that can be really fun.
Yeah. And I have a three-part question.
Okay.
Okay, so what was the hardest theme to edit? What was the most fun theme to edit? And what was your most proudest theme to edit? So hardest, most fun, and proudest.
I mean, honestly, not to cop out, but all three of those probably apply to that piece of music I'm alluding to. It was really hard, but it was really fun. And but the most satisfying when you finish that, we're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to share this with people and put it on my mixing reels and stuff like that. And then yeah, from season 3, stuff you guys have already heard. It's probably split between Carol the Cobras and pretty much every piece of music that makes up the whole Duel of the Snakes sequence. Because honestly, I mean, usually the hardest stuff is the most satisfying because you finish it, it's in a good place, it sounds good, but then you look back like, oh, that like took a lot to get it there, so you're really most proud of that because you conquered the challenge, I guess.
The Is there anything like when you watched the final show, like is there anything like that you saw that you're like, okay, like now that I'm seeing it with the dialogue or with this, like maybe I wish I did this or no regrets?
I'd say there's probably not any regrets that I have. Because things are what they are. I mean, there's no reason to regret things too much because there's no changing it. Um, yeah, I don't think there's anything like that.
And top five favorite themes from Cobra Kai. Do you have like a list or something?
Oh man, no. I mean, Johnny's theme is great. I love Crease's theme. That's really fun. Like I said, the sort of like Vietnam like prophet synth vibe. It has all these like bendy synths. It's basically whenever they're flashing back to like the intense moments of Vietnam. That's always really fun. Um, I mean, some of them, honestly, I can hear the themes in my head, but I forget exactly what the theme title is or whose name it is. um, but yeah, those are probably my top 3.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, my favorite of all time is the Miyagi-Do theme.
Oh yeah, definitely, and
Love that.
especially like yeah, all the Iwi stuff that's on there. Well, then sometimes too we have a wonderful flautist Gina who plays some of those themes, but sometimes it's her, sometimes it's Leo on Iwi. Yeah, those are always stuck in my head. But anytime I work on Cobra Kai, I always have the themes rattling in my head for a few days because they are catchy.
Very, very catchy, very
Yeah,
catchy. I was just listening to it before.
yeah.
Did you mix the music for the video game, by the way?
No, that was because there was another mixer for the first 2 seasons. There was just so much going on. It was me and another guy, Sean O'Brien, who did the mixing for. So I did back then. I did more just the orchestral stuff, the big like film score stuff, and then Sean was doing more of the strictly band stuff. But then the schedule kind of like evened out for season 3 and 4. But I think Sean did all the video game stuff.
I got it. And I have a couple more questions for you.
All right.
If you were to join any dojo, Cobra Kai, Miyagi-Do, or Eagle Fang?
I'd probably be a Miyagi-Do. I'd be one of the goody two shoes kids for sure.
Why would you say so?
That's who I was as a kid. Like even I play video games. That's kind of a funny representation. Like if I play a Star Wars game, my like light side meter is always max. Like I never. I mean, as I've gotten older now, I have fun. I'm like, okay, let's like replay a video game as like dark side or like or like Mass Effect has what the Paragon and whatever. It's basically light and dark side. But yeah, I guess growing up, I was always the like everything good, everything for the better, and I feel like Miyagi-Do is kind of almost like the rebels or something like that. They're like the good side.
Yeah.
Though it's more complicated than that. Like that's one of the things I love about Cobra Kai is it's not super binary. It's not like because even though Cobra Kai, some people from there do some bad things, they're not all bad people. Like they're more interesting and complicated than that. But yeah, I probably would fit into Miyagi-Do.
They think they're doing the right thing, even if it might not seem like it. KREESE
Right.
thinks he's doing the right thing.
Yeah. And then Eagle Fang seems to be somewhere in between.
Eagle Fang is the balance. That's
Yeah. So maybe these days I'd fit into Eagle Fang more. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Daniel thinks like, oh, like I'm out here doing balance, but Johnny's actually the one who's really found balance with Eagle Fang. So
Yeah.
And for the fans out there, do you have any upcoming projects that we should be looking forward to?
I mean, I'm also working on Ozark season 4 right now, but that's not coming out till I think like early 2022 or something like that. So that's a ways out. Trying to think of what else I've worked on recently that isn't secret. Those are the main ones. I mean, they're both season 4 of Cobra Kai and of Ozark. Yeah, those are the main ones to look out for.
Cobra Kai season 5.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, we'll see.
We'll see.
I'm hoping we get that announcement soon. And then, do they? I'm trying to think. Do they like ever start filming before this like the season comes out? Like, I'm not saying they would do that with Cobra Kai, but do they do that with shows like before the new season releases? They start filming the next season.
I'm sure sometimes. I mean, I don't always know what's going on because pre-production is anything before filming, then production is filming, and I mean, I sometimes start to get dates for my work during production, but usually, honestly, it's not even until they start editing projects until they finally start like thinking about the final post-production of the sound and music. So I usually don't even know when stuff was filmed. Sometimes I'll work on projects and I'll find out later, like, oh yeah, we shot this 2 years ago. Especially now with COVID, there's a lot of stuff that was shot a while ago, stopped for a while, and now it's finally getting finished later on. So it depends.
Yeah. And is there any advice you would give to anybody who wants to kind of pursue a career in the music industry?
Just be a sponge, just absorb as much as possible. There's great tutorials online. There's good websites like PureMix or Mix of the Masters that have, actual people, other engineers like myself that are just, that's actually kind of what I crafted my videos on YouTube around is like literally, here's my Pro Tools session. Here's what I did step by step, going through everything. And you can really see, cause that's, being able to see specifically how things were mixed and recorded, before the internet and especially before, the last decade or so of having resources like that. The only way to learn that stuff was you'd have to get a job at a studio or get a job with an engineer and actually physically watch them mix or record. So it's an amazing world we live in now where you can actually see how Adele was produced or, all these big artists on some of these websites. Pensado's Place is another great channel on YouTube that they do interviews with composers, engineers, producers, songwriters, all sorts of people, and there's always tons of great nuggets of information from all those people on there. But yeah, and it's just dive in. I mean, yeah, you said you worked in GarageBand. I mean, GarageBand can do a lot. I mean, it can't do nearly as much as the more expensive programs can do, but it's a great place to start and giving you a general idea of how to use a digital audio workstation and record yourself and I mean, the best way is just to start doing, just start messing around and then always be learning. I mean, and like I said, any of us creative professionals we're still learning as well.
Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, I am not like I am more leaning towards like the film aspect like for my career, but like I definitely love music and like would want to be involved in like if I were in film, like kind of like still overseeing the music because I
Right.
love that aspect. So
Yeah. Well, and there's all sorts of cool jobs like mine too. Like, like I said, I at one time wanted to be a composer, and then I realized, I'm still working with composers on film music, but I'm doing something kind of, different, but still working in film music. So there's all sorts of cool jobs in every department of the entertainment industry.
Yeah, exactly. Um, thank you so much for joining me here. Like,
Certainly.
this was like absolutely epic. Like, I'm just like a nerd for the music, so it's just like cool because like, like I'll be honest, like early on, I just saw Zach and Leo, and I'm like, okay, they do the music, and I didn't really think too much of it. And then, then I look in IMDb and I see, okay, wait, there's sound mixers and editors, and then there's more just so many different departments. So it was cool to
Yeah.
like get an insight into like what you do for the show, and it's crucial. And I mean, it's nominated for an Emmy, so there you go.
Yeah, it's been an honor to finally get some Emmys attention from the show.
Yeah. Do you want to shout out your like Instagram or Twitter or where people can find you and follow you?
Yeah, my Instagram that's probably where I'm most active is Film Mix, but it's PHILM_MIX. Twitter is just Phil_McGowan. Those are the main two. And then, McGowan Soundworks, my YouTube channel, if you want to see any tutorials that I put up. I mean, more coming eventually, just when I have the time to actually record them and edit them and put them all together, so hopefully more of those are coming soon from other projects and things like that. But those are my main socials.
Okay. And I'll leave the links after the stream ends. I'll put the links in the description so you guys can go check it out. Thank you everybody for joining. Hope you all enjoyed the stream. Phil, thank you again for joining. And I usually end my streams saying Cobra Kai never dies, but if you want to take this one, it's all you.
Strike hard, no mercy.
Cobra Kai never dies.
Never dies. Oh, sorry.
I was giving you the cue.
Cobra Kai never dies.
There we go.